Eala breaks down in tears after a dirty trick from Golubic. It wasn't just a match. It was a storm waiting to explode. From the very first serve, tension hung heavy in the air, the kind that even silence couldn't hide. Whispers from the locker room said Golubic had been plotting something, a plan to rattle Eala's rhythm and her mind. And when it finally happened, a sudden pause, a controversial challenge, a sly smirk, everything fell apart. Eala's focus shattered. The cheers turned into gasps. She stood there, helpless, realizing this wasn't about tennis anymore. It was personal, cruelly, deliberately personal. Tears fell, not just from pain, but from betrayal by the one person she thought still played fair. Because on that court, beneath the bright lights and quiet applause, the game turned into war, and Eala never saw it coming. The sun was setting over the Suzhou courts, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. It was supposed to be just another evening match, another step for Eala, the young star from the Philippines, chasing her next big win. She walked out with quiet determination, her headphones on, her expression calm but sharp. Every move, every breath, every stretch spoke of focus. She had been preparing for this for weeks, and her opponent, Viktorija Golubic, was no stranger. They'd faced each other before. Respect lingered between them, but so did a thin layer of tension, the kind that grows when pride meets potential. Golubic was older, more experienced, and known for her mind games. Eala, younger, hungrier, carried the fire of someone who had something to prove. Everyone expected a clean, competitive match, but nobody knew that this one would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. From the first few rallies, it was clear that Eala came to fight. Her shots were crisp, her footwork precise, her energy electric. Golubic, though, was unnervingly calm, smiling at missed calls, shrugging off winners, and occasionally staring across the net a little too long. It was subtle, but the message was clear. You're not ready for me yet. Still, Eala held her ground. The crowd sensed it, a rising tension like the quiet before thunder. With every point, the young Filipina's confidence grew. Her family and coach watched from the stands, believing this could be her moment to finally silence the doubts. But beneath that surface calm, something was brewing. Between sets, Golubic lingered near the umpire's chair, whispering something only the official could hear. Eala noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. It was the kind of moment that players file away quietly, until it matters. By the start of the second set, the rhythm had changed. Calls that once went Eala's way now seemed uncertain. A line ball here, a delay there. Small things, but enough to disrupt her flow. Golubic's smirk grew with every pause, every protest. It wasn't obvious enough for the cameras to catch, but Eala felt it. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling, the kind that eats at a player's focus point by point. Yet she refused to break. Focus, she muttered under her breath after every point. Just play. But her eyes told another story. Frustration creeping in, disbelief starting to crack through her calm. The match tightened. The crowd grew restless. And in that electric silence, the first spark of controversy flickered to life. No one could see it yet, but this wasn't just going to be about who won or lost. It was about something deeper, respect, fairness, and the fine line between competition and cruelty. Because in the world of tennis, sometimes the most dangerous shots aren't the ones hit with the racket. They're the ones delivered with a smile. It happened midway through the second set. The air was thick, every rally louder, every breath heavier. The scoreline read 4-3, Eala leading, and momentum was finally on her side. The crowd sensed it. The underdog had found her rhythm. Golubic, however, looked unfazed. She adjusted her wristband, walked to the baseline, and smiled. Not the smile of a sportswoman, but of someone about to pull the trigger. The serve came fast, slicing toward the corner. Eala sprinted, reached, and fired back a forehand winner that landed just inside the line. The crowd roared, but before the applause could fade, Golubic raised her hand. Out, she said sharply. The umpire hesitated. The line judge glanced uncertainly. Golubic pressed the challenge button, even though Eala's shot had been called in. The replay system glitched, freezing for several seconds before flashing, "No data available." The point was replayed. Eala's eyes widened. "No data, that was in," she pleaded. The umpire shook her head. "Replay the point." Golubic smirked, walked back to her mark, and served again. The rhythm was broken. The calm shattered. It was subtle but effective. The next few points slipped away, not because Eala was outplayed, but because she was thrown off balance. Then came the second blow. During a changeover, Golubic called for a medical timeout, clutching her shoulder, grimacing in pain. The crowd went silent. Eala, confused, waited patiently. 10 minutes passed. 15. Golubic returned, seemingly recovered, moving with the same sharpness as before. It was a delay, a perfectly timed one, designed to cool Eala's fire. And it worked. When play resumed, Eala's energy was gone. Her timing off, Golubic took full advantage, drawing her into long rallies, forcing errors. From the outside, it looked like experience defeating youth, but those watching closely knew better. Something had shifted beneath the surface. As the set slipped away, frustration began to rise in Eala's chest. Her hands trembled between points. She looked toward her coach, eyes wide with disbelief. He mouthed, "Stay calm, just play." But she couldn't shake the feeling that something unfair had happened. Not once, but twice. The crowd started to whisper. Commentators began exchanging glances. "Strange," one said. "That challenge system failure. We rarely see that." The camera caught Eala wiping her face, not from sweat, but from something heavier. Tears building behind eyes that still refused to quit. And yet, Golubic kept smiling, steady, deliberate, confident. She knew exactly what she was doing. A small psychological edge, a twist of the knife that wouldn't show up on the stats sheet. By the time the set ended 6-2 in Golubic's favor, the match had transformed. This wasn't just a competition anymore. It was a test of emotion, integrity, and composure. And as Eala sat on the bench, gripping her towel, she whispered something under her breath that only the mic caught. "Why does it always have to be like this?" The game was still alive, but now it wasn't just about winning. It was about surviving. By the time the third set began, the atmosphere around the court had shifted. The calm, respectful tone of the match was gone, replaced by a tension so thick it almost hummed through the air. Fans leaned forward in their seats, cameras zoomed in, and every sound, the bounce of the ball, the scrape of shoes, the faint murmurs from the stands, carried a kind of electricity. Eala tried to steady herself. Her breathing was deep, controlled, but her eyes gave her away. The sparkle of confidence that once burned there had turned into a flicker of doubt. Across the net, Golubic moved like a chess player, calm, precise, emotionless. Every pause, every delay, every smirk felt like another message. "I'm in control now." The opening games of the final set were a battle of endurance and pride. Eala fought with everything she had left, stretching for impossible shots, painting the lines, roaring after every point she won. The crowd was split, half cheering her defiance, half stunned by Golubic's composure. Yet under that applause, whispers began to grow louder. "Did you see that call?" one fan muttered. "She's doing it again," another whispered. And then came the moment that broke everything. At 3-3, on a crucial break point, Golubic served wide, a clean ace, according to the umpire. But Eala's instinct screamed otherwise. She threw her hand up immediately. "Out!" she shouted. The replay on the big screen flickered. The ball mark clearly showed just outside the line. Gasps erupted. The crowd booed. But before the scoreboard could adjust, the chair umpire calmly announced, "Game, Golubic." Eala froze. She looked up, disbelief etched across her face. "That was out," she said softly, almost pleadingly. No response. Golubic turned her back, already walking to her chair. That's when the first tear slipped down Eala's cheek. Not from pain, not even from defeat. but from the weight of injustice pressing down on her chest. The camera caught it, and within seconds, social media exploded. Clips flooded X and TikTok. Justice for Eala, WTA controversy, Golubic trick. Fans everywhere debated what they had just seen. Some called it strategy, others called it manipulation. But one thing was clear. Everyone was talking about it. Back on court, Eala wiped her face, forcing herself to keep playing. She wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Her next service game was pure defiance. Heavy serves, fearless forehands, screams after every winner. The crowd rose with her, chanting her name, trying to push her through the fog. But Golubic wasn't fazed. She thrived in the chaos. Every time Eala looked like she might break through, another questionable moment followed. A slow call, a cold stare, a smirk that cut deeper than any forehand. By the time they reached 5-5, the energy was on the edge of collapse. Eala's chest heaved with every breath. Golubic stayed still, almost smug. The entire stadium felt divided, two worlds colliding in slow motion. When Golubic finally broke serve to lead 6-5, Eala dropped her racket and stared at the ground. The tears came again, silent but heavy, as if the match had turned into something cruel, something meant to break her spirit, not just her game. The crowd erupted into boos when Golubic took the final point minutes later. Eala walked to the net, eyes red, and extended her hand. Golubic shook it, without a word, without a glance. The cameras followed Eala as she walked off court, hiding her face behind her towel. It wasn't defeat that crushed her. It was the feeling that she'd never been given a fair chance to win. And outside the arena, the storm was just beginning. By the time Eala left the court, the world had already chosen sides. Within minutes, clips of the match flooded social media. One slowed-down replay of the disputed call spread like wildfire. The ball mark, clear as day, landing outside the line. Fans were furious. Comments filled every corner of the internet. Unbelievable! How could the umpire miss that? She was robbed. That wasn't tennis, that was manipulation. The hashtags, Justice for Eala and Cheer Dirty Trick from Golubic, began trending globally within hours. Analysts, former players, even commentators who had stayed silent during the match began to weigh in. One former pro tweeted, "There's a difference between strategy and disrespect." Today, that line was crossed. Meanwhile, Golubic's camp stayed quiet. No statements, no apologies, just silence, and that silence only fueled the fire. Every still frame of her smirk was shared, dissected and criticized. Some called it arrogance. Others called it composure. But to Eala's growing army of supporters, it looked like guilt. Eala herself stayed away from interviews that night. Her coach said she needed space. Reporters waited outside the locker room, cameras ready, but she never appeared. Inside, witnesses said she sat in silence for nearly an hour, staring at the floor, her towel still damp with tears. The next morning, sports channels replayed the match endlessly, frame by frame. Experts debated every call, every glance, every pause. One commentator said, "If what Golubic did was intentional, it's one of the dirtiest psychological tactics we've seen this season." Another countered, "Mind games are part of the sport. Eala just couldn't handle the pressure." The divide was sharp. Two narratives fighting for dominance. For Eala's fans, she was the victim of injustice, a symbol of youth crushed by manipulation. For Golubic's defenders, she was simply the smarter, more seasoned player. But beneath all the noise, something deeper stirred. A conversation about fairness, integrity, and the invisible politics of professional tennis. Eala finally broke her silence 3 days later with a short post on Instagram. A single picture, her holding her racket, eyes red but fierce, with the caption, "Respect the game." "That's all I ask," the message exploded. Over 1 million likes. Thousands of comments. Among them, a simple reply from a fellow player. "We saw what happened." Meanwhile, tournament officials released a brief statement saying there was no evidence of misconduct. It was the kind of line that only made things worse. Fans accused the WTA of covering up bias. Petition pages appeared online demanding stricter rules for match reviews and timeouts. In the days that followed, Eala didn't speak again, but her silence spoke louder than words. Training clips surfaced, her hitting alone, more focused than ever. Every strike of the ball looked heavier, angrier, as if she was trying to erase the memory of that night. Golubic, on the other hand, returned to the tour as if nothing had happened. She gave polite interviews, smiled at cameras, and brushed off questions about the controversy. But the whispers followed her everywhere, because no matter what the official report said, fans had already decided the truth for themselves. And in tennis, reputation travels faster than victory. The dirty trick might have won her the match, but it also changed everything about how the world saw her. Days turned into weeks, but the echo of that match refused to fade. Every highlight reel, every sports discussion seemed to circle back to one question. What really happened that night between Eala and Viktorija Golubic? At first, it was all emotion, outrage, heartbreak, and anger. But then came the analysis. Tennis analysts began dissecting the match with forensic precision. They slowed down every frame, measured the disputed ball marks, compared challenge delays, and tracked the moments that shifted momentum. The findings were hard to ignore. One independent review pointed out that Golubic's injury timeout had come at a statistically critical moment, exactly when Eala's first serve percentage was peaking. Another video breakdown suggested that the replay malfunction occurred only once during the entire tournament, in that specific match. Fans didn't need a verdict. They already had one. Yet amid the noise, Eala chose silence. No accusations. No public blame. Only quiet determination. Reporters tried to bait her into speaking. Was it deliberate? One asked. She smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't about who wins points. They're about who keeps their heart clean." It was that calm, almost poetic answer that changed the tone of the conversation. The focus shifted from anger to admiration. She wasn't just the girl who cried on court. She was the player who refused to fight dirt with dirt. Meanwhile, pressure mounted on Golubic. Her interviews grew shorter, her smiles thinner. Questions followed her everywhere. Do you think Eala deserved a fairer outcome? Did you intentionally use mind games? She brushed them off, but each clip of her deflecting spread like wildfire. Even neutral fans began to turn, not because of proof, but because of perception. Inside locker rooms, whispers grew louder. Players talked about the Suzhou incident like an unspoken rule, a reminder of how easily a reputation can shift overnight. Some defended Golubic, saying, "That's tennis. Mind games are part of the grind." But others admitted privately that they'd never seen Eala so emotionally broken, and that maybe, just maybe, something unfair had happened. Behind closed doors, Eala returned to training with a new fire. Her coaches described her as different, focused, quiet, ruthless. Every session became a kind of therapy. Each serve and backhand an outlet for everything she'd swallowed in silence. Then, during a press event weeks later, she finally addressed it. People will say what they want. I've learned one thing. You can't control their tricks, but you can control your response. And mine is to keep winning. The room fell silent for a moment before the applause started. That quote would go viral within hours. Eala had turned her heartbreak into a statement. She didn't expose anyone. She didn't need to. Her poise and honesty did it for her, and that's when the story shifted, from controversy to comeback. The girl who cried became the woman who endured. The tears that once symbolized defeat became the spark for something much bigger. Because in the end, truth in tennis doesn't always come from referees or reviews. Sometimes, it comes from how a player chooses to stand after falling. Weeks after the chaos faded from headlines, the echoes of that night still lingered in whispers, in locker rooms, in press conferences, in every corner of women's tennis. The Suzhou match had become more than just a memory. It was a reference point, A story players told each other about pride, power, and pain. For Eala, it was a wound that healed in public. Every time she stepped back onto the court, she carried it, not as a scar, but as a lesson. Gone was the young player who sought fairness from the system. In her place stood someone quieter, harder, sharper. Someone who had learned that respect in tennis is never handed out freely. It must be earned, defended, and sometimes reclaimed. Fans noticed the transformation almost immediately. Her next few matches were filled with an intensity they hadn't seen before, cleaner strokes, fiercer eyes, and a calmness that came from surviving fire. Every swing looked like a statement. I'm still here. But the ghost of Golubic remained. Even when she wasn't around, her name hung over Eala's victories. Interviewers tried to revisit it, desperate for a soundbite. Have you forgiven her? They asked. Eala's answer was always the same. A soft smile followed by, there's nothing to forgive. The court remembers everything. And somehow that line stuck. It spread across fan pages and social media like a mantra. The court remembers everything. A reminder that truth, no matter how buried, eventually finds its way back into the light. As for Golubic, her wins came quieter now. Every time her name appeared in tournament draws, comment sections filled with echoes of the past, questions, doubts, reminders. She tried to move on, but reputations in tennis are like shadows. They stretch longer than you expect, and they always follow the light. In the months that followed, Eala's story began to inspire more than outrage. It inspired resilience. Young players spoke of her composure, her refusal to lash out, her ability to channel humiliation into hunger. She became unintentionally the symbol of emotional strength in a sport often defined by silence and decorum. The Suzhou incident didn't break her. It remade her. And in doing so, it changed the way fans saw her, not just as a promising athlete, but as a survivor of the unseen battles that shape greatness. Because sometimes, legacy isn't written by victories or trophies. It's written in the moments when the world turns its back and you stand anyway. So, was it just a rivalry? Or the beginning of something much bigger? Maybe the answer doesn't lie in the tears or the tricks, but in the calm that came after. Because if there's one thing that story proved, it's this. Tennis may reward the strongest, but it remembers the bravest. If you felt that story, make sure to subscribe for more untold tennis moments, where every match hides a truth and every rivalry has a heart behind it. In the end, this wasn't just about a match. It was about pride, pain, and the price of silence. Eala walked off that court in tears, but those tears turned into fire. She came back stronger, calmer, and more dangerous than ever. Golubic may have won that night, but Eala won something far greater, the respect of millions who saw the truth behind the trick. Because in tennis, power fades, but integrity doesn't. If this story hit you deep, don't just leave, stay. Subscribe now and join the journey where every serve hides a secret, every rivalry tells a story, and every emotion leaves a mark. More stories are coming, louder, realer, and even more human. Because this isn't just tennis. It's everything that makes us feel alive.